did. I just community principle.
All right, thanks, Brenda. All right, let's start city council work session for September 6th, 2022. Keith?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Before you and I, we're just going to do a work session on the City of Sherwood DEIA statement. Just kind of a brief overview of how we got to this point. Sherwood Resolution 2022-021 is adopting City Council pillars, goals, and deliverables. Deliverable 6.8 being creating a city statement for DEIA. So internally, we got staff and stakeholders together to start to discuss what a potential statement could be. When we got together, one of the things working with staff, I went off of a couple of what I consider benchmarks for great statements. And so the two that always come to mind, destroy, rebut by Nike, and before this decade is out, landing a man on the moon and returning to safety. President Kenny started the Apollo missions, Apollo moon missions, And the idea was what I wanted to kind of, with the objective to talk about is we want our statement to be simple. We want it to be easy to remember. We want it to have purpose and power behind it. So these were kind of the models, what we were looking at to try to determine what would be a good statement and what would be successful for our organization. We went out and looked at sample statements, and so I wanted to just share some sample statements to give an idea of what other communities were doing. I don't necessarily plan on reading all of these, but we looked for comparable cities and neighboring cities to see what they talked about, just to get an idea and a feel for what some of their sample statements were for their DEIA statements as well. So we used Tualatin, Tiger, Lake Oswego, and Hillsborough on this slide, and you can see most of them are pretty concise and pretty direct, trying to do that. Wilsonville's was a little bit different. They went with a mission and a vision, but again, it's pretty simple in terms of trying to create something that's easier to use. Westland, again, pretty simple, straightforward statement. Kubernetes was another one we looked at. They didn't have one, but they did mention it in their hiring for their city council position, or for their city manager position, which they just recently filled. Can be city council, and then Beaverton. So these were sort of the examples and the models that we used internally as we started to work through some of these. Looking at a bigger city kind of to the south, and then also Washington County. Again, just looking at the basic statements that were used in models. So based off of all of this, we came to discussion and started to work through and want to present tonight a statement that we propose for the next DEI statement from the City Council. That proposed statement is this: the City of Sherwood expressly supports and endorses the culture of appreciation for the inherent value of all persons within.
Basically, a chunk out of candies.
It's similar to candies. I think if you look, it's got similar language to a lot of them.
I like it.
The idea was to very much make it, simple, straightforward, to try to be all encompassing without getting into a lot of commas and things like that. Just keep it short and concise. So, wanted to get your thoughts and feedback on the proposed language and any questions you have on this.
Appreciate the time and thought put on it.
I like that it's short, concise, simple, not too wordy, not too involved.
Taylor?
Well, my thought was I would like fewer words.
All right.
Like the city of Sherwood, like the expressly supports and endorses a culture of appreciation, to me is a little bit clunky. I would rather just say the city of Sherwood, maybe supports the culture and inherent value of all persons within the community, or something like it. And in fact, I think I even sent an alternate to you, K2. It feels a little bit like what I love about the destroy Reebok is you could remember that, right? And so every time I'm always looking for it to be fewer words if possible, if we could do it. Because I don't really know what expressly supports and endorses a culture of appreciation. I like that, to me, feels lawyery or clunky a little bit.
I am gonna disagree, but that's okay, Taylor. I actually like the word expressly in there because that, if it just says support, that's ambiguous in my mind. Expressly says it's clear, we have intent, there's no wiggle room here, so I like the word expressly in there. Overall, I think it's really showing to the point. And I think it needs to be a rather broad statement. Use words like all in our community. I think that's important. To improve this better. Say yours, Renee.
That was one of several voices.
I mean, it's very much almost word for word out of Canby's. Except they added to the front at the beginning, so, I mean, it's.
You're saying you plagiarized it?
No, I'm saying that another community also uses the same thing, so it's probably pretty good.
And the idea was to take, kind of what we liked about the other ones. so
Yeah.
We could incorporate that in there.
I'm all about library and have to be all the time.
Well, I hated Wilsonville's, so let's not incorporate anything from there.
Too long.
I had Erica explain to me for almost a half hour about the difference between a mission and a vision. So I don't want to, it's a meaningless distinction for me. So I like it. I'm okay with having expressly be in there. I don't know that it conveys more or less than, and then endorses a culture of appreciation. What can't we just say we appreciate the different cultures? I mean, it's not the way that normal humans talk. And so I'm saying the phrase, like, when have you ever said, I endorse the culture of appreciation? That's not a phrase anybody uses ever. So that's my only pushback, but you know what, if everybody else likes it, I'm not going to die on that hill.
So Taylor, along that line, the city of Sherwood expressly supports the inherent value of all persons within the community. Is that something more in line with what you were thinking?
I even like expressly supports and appreciates, all of the cultures within, the community, or appreciates and values all of the cultures within our community, or something like that.
It's not necessarily meaning that the various cultures, it's expressing the, making sure that we're creating a culture of appreciation.
A culture of appreciation, though, what help me understand what that means. I'm just not familiar with that phrase.
So it's the first step in creating equality, inclusion, an atmosphere, a culture of inclusion. So by expressly stating it, then you take the steps to get there. For instance, if we look at the questions that the high school, or not the high school, the school district uses, those are the guideposts. So you start with the mission, or not the statement, you start with the statement itself, and then you create the steps to get there. So by saying it endorses a culture of appreciation, it's saying that our culture is to appreciate the diversity that is within our community.
But what I hear out of that too, and I agree with you, Renee, but I also hear, like, let's say, walk a mile in another person's shoes. It's, when we're trying to solve for any kind of problem, whether it's conflict between two people or two groups, or just setting up a new program, being willing to walk a mile in another person's shoes and understand the perspective is important. We spend too much time divided, talking past each other.
Yeah, so I guess I'm wanting to go further than just saying, hey, we're at the starting point of endorsing a culture of appreciation and saying we do appreciate it, we value it, right? It's
That's taking, I wish we were there, Taylor.
oh,
Yeah.
no, it's aspirational for sure, but that's the same thing with destroy Reebok, right? Reebok wasn't destroyed at the time. I don't know if they are still, but you know what I mean?
There was a big conversation about the words in there and what the fear of some of the staff that are around the table is that if we come out as strong as what I'm hearing you say, and then we don't follow with our actions, then we're setting ourselves up for failure.
Oh, well, I fully intend to follow with our actions. Okay.
And I might not be articulating that as well as it was expressed in the meeting.
Okay.
And so Keith is here. Kristen's here.
Kristen's part of the conversation too. I think the idea was to try to really be as simple as we could, with as few words as we could, be as broad and encompassing. And I think this was kind of the language we fell on, that we really felt like did all that without getting too far into weeds.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. I get
All
what
right.
you said, I like it.
You should have seen the first statement that Sean and I had written.
I
It
heard
was
about that
much
one.
much more involved.
And I'm like, nope.
I'm good.
All right.
Word. No statement, no document's perfect. It's a living and breathing thing, and
Can be updated, changed, improved.
I like it for now.
Anyone else?
Just like that, we've accomplished a goal. You can like mark that one done, Keith.
We can put it on.
Put
a-
that
Put
down.
it on an agenda, just to formally have council adopt this as it's written.
Awesome.
Great work.
Certainly. Let's move on to the second item, which is 5G. Facilities standards.
Favorite conversation.
Haven't talked about this one in a while.
Hopefully, I can put everything to rest.
Next one.
Okay, adoption of 5G facility standard details for the engineering design manual, design and standard details manual. Discussion items, background history, proposed design standards, and the adoption process. If everything goes according to plan. Basically, what we want to do is, there's two examples here of what we don't want. So we're trying to get around all that. Background history, smart wireless, facility design standards were adopted by resolution 2019-045. Exhibit A of the resolution called out several instances of facility pole design requirements, specifically exhibits B through D. These exhibits were not attached to the resolution from what I can tell, and weren't attached to the resolution as those design details were still in process of development. Design details have now been completed, at least what I'm going to present to you as what I think are complete details, and are ready for adoption by the city for addition to our engineering design standard details manual. And these are the proposed standards, the details that are proposed that we put into the manual. So what you're seeing here is the standalone monopole, the standard pole with our street light, the Westbrook style street light, one with our Cobra head and a couple more that include box lighting that we have in certain areas. But for the main thing I want to point out is that what we have here is we have a cabinet at the base of this facility that is 27 cubic feet exactly out that meets the criteria of the federal government, provides the space and area needed for the facilities providers to be able to establish their equipment. The pole diameter is 14 inches. We have a pole standard that goes from 8 to 4.5, 8 to 5. We have a tapered pole. That's.
This is a much smaller pole than what we projected
Correct.
Yeah.
4 years ago.
4 years ago, yes.
Because we also said,
We need-
technology's
Figure
gonna
it out.
evolve, and stuff's gonna get smaller.
Yeah, well, the technology is still gonna improve, but the volumetric requirements that the federal government has established are gonna change. So, and the main thing I was looking at is what's the aesthetics of this pole gonna be when you stick a CAN antenna on top of it, which is 14 inches in diameter, and it's not going to change in size. So,
That's a physics thing.
well, it's an aesthetics thing. You can either have a pole that does taper, in which case it looks like a giant Q-tip on
Yeah.
top of a skinny pole. Or we can maintain the pole diameter uniformly and then place our lighting appurtenances to that pole. And it would be uniform, and it won't be these other ones that I've looked at through different communities, like the Smart Stack. Smart Stack has been approved in a couple of different areas further south, but their pole diameters are 18 to 20 inches uniform all the way up. So you just got this huge massive thing straight up. At least what we do is we put it in a cabinet. The cabinet is, it's gonna be fairly, it's 2 feet by 2 feet. And it's got venting and all that sort of stuff, but.
It's gonna have the structural strength of the pole on top of it.
Correct. It's designed for that.
Yeah.
So, we have those standards. And it's not gonna be, when you look at the pole itself, above the base cabinet's like 6 foot. I have there 6'9" inches. Above 7 foot, it goes back down to a style of pole that is more consistent with the rest of the streetscape, street lighting.
So that cabinet is 6 feet tall?
Yeah.
6 to 7
That's
feet
to
tall?
get 27 cubic feet of.
Yeah, oh, really? Okay. That's
That's the equipment.
at the bottom? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's taller than me.
It's 30 feet, the first two are 30 feet, up to 30-foot tall poles.
Well-
So I'm skipping it now. You first.
So a couple questions. So 2 by 2 times 4 times 6 is. I guess I can, well, that doesn't get you 27, does it?
No, but the exact stuff is gonna be in the numbers. They're gonna have to show me how to get.
So,
But the idea is, the dimension is 6'9" or something.
Yeah, to get to them.
They get to 27 cubic feet.
so a couple questions. So we'll be changing our right of way requirements based on that new footprint? And will this, like, I'm thinking of an example like in Woodhaven where they have a light pole, in median. Is it still going to work in those situations?
It will.
And
And there's a real reason why I've gone this route. We'll get to the last detail, which is putting the sign.
okay. And then the last quick question, noise requirements, if it's vented and fanned, do we want to set some max decibels or anything like that? So we don't have,
I don't know. I
Noise.
have no idea what type of equipment or noise that comes out of these things. Nobody has any information. I've got a stack of.
Right, so as part of the code, do you, out of the gate, say, I mean, we have a noise
Ordinance.
ordinance as it is, but do you say something that
has to be below a certain
Has to be
decibel or something.
Well, it's never going to reach the level that the noise will.
Right,
That's why.
so should we establish something that is more conducive for a
You
neighborhood?
can do that. You could do that. The part that I'm looking at is, I haven't seen any information that tells me what that noise level is under operation.
100% understand that. I'm just suggesting we get ahead of that and set a max decibel. So we have that just in case they come in with something.
I don't know what it would be. I mean, you want to set it at something like 87? What happens if they come in and they say, well, technology, everything comes in at 92? I think it's pretty high.
Imagine we walk past one of these and it's going zzz or something.
Yeah.
It depends on, depends on a lot of stuff. I don't know what these things operate with. I've gone to the ones over in the Tiger area,
Can you hear them?
but they're up on the pole, you know, the refrigerator, and you go walk underneath and you hear the pump. Is it loud? Well, that's 12, 14 feet up in the air. It's loud enough that you can hear it.
It might be louder, maybe down.
But the question comes up is it obnoxious if it is humming all the time at a lower sound level? Is that too much?
Yeah, and I just don't want to have it, if we set a decibel level and they don't meet it, we would need a conversation.
I would say that right now, what I'm trying to do is get this stuff squared away, because when the technology, when they submit, then we can ask the questions and find out what it is. But we gotta have something to start with. Right now, there's nothing on the books that says, at least aesthetically, this is what you're going to have to meet first.
Right, so I have two questions. So far, just one, we'll have requirements on when they're allowed to do the taller pole,
Oh, yeah.
so they can't put a taller pole in the neighborhood.
No, they have to, basically, all this stuff comes back to us and we review it first. And we can say, no, you're not sticking a 60-foot pole, monopole in here.
And we have 30 and we have 40
Yeah,
up here.
yeah,
So I would imagine that is the tallest of the two versions of the permit.
correct.
So that we don't want a 40 in a neighborhood.
Sure.
Right?
Can that be in our code?
Well, if you put it into the
The
design
design
manual,
manual.
the code basically references the design.
So as long as it's in the
Oh,
design.
so right, so
So we have, if it's in the design manual, you can change it over time to stuff as technology changes, gives you the flexibility. Put it straight in code, you might as well.
Are you proposing in the design manual to identify when you can do a 30-foot pole and when you can do a 40-foot pole? Or
I can. I don't see a problem with adding that specific text into the design manual text that requires, that goes along with this. So there's, these are just the details to start with. We can be more prescriptive with it. I just need.
Starting point.
Great,
So if that's what you want, I will make sure it gets in there.
I think it's a reasonable start, and if we learn something different. And one more question, then Taylor's got a question or two. In the design reference manual, are we requiring from a site distance standpoint limits on how close one of these poles can be to a stop sign or a intersection? Should we, do we need to?
I think that as far as site distance goes, because this stuff will be possibly at intersections, even where we have lighting now, we do have poles in that area. They don't necessarily obstruct because they aren't big enough to obstruct. These might.
Right, so I mean, certainly our 3 foot by 3 foot corner pieces in Old Town were a problem.
Yes, they are.
So we were on a 2 foot by 2 foot thing that could be in a corner, could be a problem.
Could be. And I think that the way the code reads is it still needs to have engineering approval
Okay,
of the layout of these things. So I think that that gives us the ability to sort of prescribe how much distance. But if you want it set in stone, I'll put it in the design manual, that it can't be within the 50-foot radius of any intersection, center of any intersection, and that sticks it far enough away that it's not within the sight distance of any intersection.
That sort of solves a lot of work up front, I mean, right,
That's easy to do.
yeah.
So those are good,
Yeah.
those are good things that I can put into the text of the manual. Perfect, not a problem.
Awesome. That's my other nugget. And then Taylor?
Yeah, my only question was, when we had this discussion about light poles for alleys, I think it was, we talked about poles that were standardly available. Are these kind of poles standardly available, or is it going to make it more difficult for people to bring 5G into our city?
The pole extension is standard PGE pole.
Okay,
It's the criteria. The pole, the AT&T people are going to have to comply with.
okay,
So I'm passing on what the PGE standards are for pole diameter, wall thickness, anchorage, all that sort of stuff goes into that pole. How they get that pole attached to the cabinet, and the cabinet gets attached to the pedestal, that's their bailiwick to solve, but they gotta do this.
okay. So what my question is getting at is, by us making it look nicer, which I agree, this looks much nicer than the other ones that you showed us. Is it making it more difficult for a company to come in and say, oh, we're going to put 5G in Sherwood? And so, you know what I mean? Like, because we're going to be a one-off.
Any requirement we do will make it a little bit, yeah, I mean, hopefully other cities will see what we're doing with this base cabinet and follow our lead.
Okay.
But we're ahead of the game here,
Yeah.
because from what I can tell, no other city really wants to fight. They basically, on a case-by-case scenario, they submit their stuff and then the city reviews it and says, well, does it look okay in that neighborhood in that particular spot? And suddenly, oops, they come in for a second poll and it's completely different. And they're going, well, why didn't you, well,
That sounds like a mess.
that's what I'm trying to get out of this, is if you want aesthetics, if you want to control the aesthetics, you can't control them coming in and putting it in.
Right.
But you can control the aesthetics. Well, this is strictly aesthetics.
Yep.
Because they can stick their equipment in round poles that are much bigger in diameter. They gotta go 24 inches in diameter, but they don't vary that pole. It's like 24 inches all the way up. It's just a huge. So the idea is, this is giving us the flexibility of trying to hide this equipment into what would be a better background. A little bit, so if somebody were to come out in their front yard, and these won't be placed, like next to their driveway, it's gonna be on a property.
Yeah,
It's gonna have to be located on a property, because that's the least impact.
and Taylor, further answer your question, when the FCC came out with that ruling back, was 4 years or 5 years ago, they took a lot of authority away from cities to manage the process. In terms of, I mean, if you read their ruling, they could attach a backpack to any public structure they wanted to. So we're trying to make sure we have some control over this process as we move forward.
Okay.
This is the first, we got the information in there, we got it in code that basically we had to put in to meet the federal government standards and timing requirements for establishing that code. So that got done. What happened was the details, so we couldn't get it built fast, couldn't design it fast enough, couldn't get the information fast enough to figure out how to get it in. We passed the resolution without the details.
Yep.
So I'm just backtracking and saying, oh, here's how we're gonna do this.
So another question, power. So how are these going to be metered? Are we
And
gonna-
they have to run a separate line.
So is there going to be one of those ugly big chrome boxes with a tower
We
meter?
don't know how that's gonna work out, because I haven't seen anything like that. What I've seen is that they run their own, if you look at, well, let's go up to the next detail, because I think,
So on the right away, they're going to run power and.
if you look here, you're gonna see that I have two separate electrical feeds, one for the streetlight portion, public portion, and one for their power supply. And basically, that was based on what I've seen with other cities where they've done this, is if somebody comes out and takes out something like a pole someplace, a light pole, that doesn't have one of these features, the power goes down for that segment. If it's attached to that wire feed, their system goes down. And they don't want it. They want an independent system. So they run this thing and they say, we give a different power feed. So what I expect is you're gonna see what's going on with broadband all over again with these, Verizon, AT&T, and they're gonna be either sharing the power or they're gonna be running a lot of time.
And that's why it's gonna be a long rollout before these companies get into neighborhoods.
They'll hit the industrial core areas the most, where you could get the biggest bang for the buck is gonna be the business usage.
Yeah, high density business sectors.
That's where their biggest thing is. Then they'll go to school areas and areas around the schools.
Well, and it depends on the provider, right? T-Mobile's on a completely different spectrum, so their density requirements are different.
Yeah. So I can't tell you anything. I just know that, based on 5G having limited range, when you have obstacles in the way, worst case scenario, every 150 feet, you're gonna have a tower. That's on one system, and you've got, say, 3 providers, each one of them have their own. It's gonna be every flipping telephone.
There's gonna be no more dirt left, it's just gonna be conduit.
Well, if you look at the size of the pedestal, it's 9 feet.
9 feet underground,
Oh my God.
And 3 foot diameter. Now I've run,
Seriously?
a little bit shallower for the 40 or for the 30 footer, maybe, or you're just gonna make it all. The idea is they're gonna have to come in and show me how they're gonna, to make these pedestals. This is just a baseline because it works. I know, you take snow load, you take wind loading from the zone that you've got, you take the weight of the pole, the weight of the cab, the weight of the equipment, you throw it all in there, and then you've got the different light standards, and you say, okay, what's my overturning moment? What's the amount of concrete resisting that? How much soil prism is on that? And then I say, is it gonna go anywhere? No. If they wanna come back and show me something less that does not go anywhere, it could be longer, narrower, longer. I don't think it's gonna be less than 2 feet in diameter because they're gonna have to have a cabinet to connect to it.
So you're putting a stake in the ground for the conversation.
Yeah.
That was a pun, but.
Yeah.
If I point it at it, yes, if I can
Give
make
them
a
a
mistake.
starting point. basically.
But the idea is, when you've got, the cantenna is not lightweight. You've got a lot of weight at the end of a pole, and when you stick, that's like putting a sail. Yes, it's only this wide and this tall, but the weight plus that wind load, you got a lot of force going this way that wants to bend it. And the only way it's gonna bend it, it's not gonna do it with the pipe, is it's gonna try and rotate it so out the ground. What's gonna hold it back is the weight of that pedestal and the weight of the soil prism. And that's the only thing that's gonna resist.
Yeah.
That's the long and short. The calculations are a little bit more intense.
So just some information for everybody. I learned this at the NLC leadership meeting, but assuming the Senate appoints the last FCC position, because they're installing that, looks like there's going to be a push for more studies on the issue of the radio waves and health and safe distances. So that could change things down the road here. I'm thinking of situations where one of these is in front of a 3-story house, or something like that. But the other question I have is, someone drives into one of these things and knocks it over. Who's liable to replace
Utility
it.
provider. Not us.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because this is.
This is
value
their,
of that pole.
this is their response. It's our it's gonna be our system. We're gonna own the cabinet. They're gonna have the equipment in it, but they break it, they gotta replace it.
So when you say they break it, so I'm talking
If the
about,
public breaks it, the guys who maintain it have to come out and replace it. at their
Okay.
cost.
and including the pole.
Including the pole?
Okay,
That's the value, and they can pursue the driver on their own?
yes,
It's all their problem.
yeah, okay.
We're dictating what this is looking like.
Yeah, because.
We maintaining the light.
And I just asked the question because the capital value of that pole just went way up. You know, with all
It
that.
does.
Yeah, so,
I can't, so why they're not gonna be building very, and I mentioned to Keith earlier, but they're allowed, these carriers are allowed to use the 5G laws code, to come in and put one of these up, but not put 5G equipment in there, they put 4G equipment in.
I don't know any I am not technically competent in that, but I'm not aware of any 5G equipment currently on the market except for experimental stuff. Most of it is 4G expansionary.
my guess is digging into my own stay that the antenna sizes for 4G are bigger and different because of the wavelengths.
Yeah.
I doubt that you can fit them.
Probably.
Can, by us adopting this, did we already grant the 2 poles?
Those 2 poles that came in are no longer in the system. They did not build them in time, so the permit ran out.
Breaks my heart. That's another nugget of great news.
I was holding that back.
Remember when they asked that they could apply for a permit and sit out there forever? That was part of that conversation.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
Yeah. Okay, so the details really are 4-pole designs, which is a monopole plus 3 light poles, our box, Coverhead, and the Westbrook. Those are the 3 poles that we're going to support, or the 3 lighting systems we're going to support. One of the details, it gets into all the specifics of pole design, materials, color. Anything that impacts the style,
Blue or black?
it's black. There's the plaque on the pole, we have to detail that, we're gonna have to provide that on every pole, because if you have multiple vendors out there providing these things, you don't know which one is which. And most people want to look at it and just be able to say, hey, it's pole number, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So, the footing detail, and then, adoption process, if details are determined to be acceptable. So this is the first step is, do you guys have any more questions? Detail around acceptability of these details.
Yeah, just before we jump into the process, one more question.
Sure.
So did you contemplate, like I'm envisioning, you have a 2-story home, and put a pole right in front of it, so now that radiation pattern is right in the master bedroom, where, when it's up above the ground, you have to get a ways away from it. So I'm just wondering, did you contemplate not having?
There's nothing I can do about placement other than to say, if you're gonna place it, it's gonna be on property. That's the best I can do.
Based on that, with the FCC and this,
I cannot dictate placement to the point of saying, well, no, you're not gonna put it on the street at all. If I can restrict it, I'll restrict the whole street, The best I can do is say, for aesthetics,
I can
and
just,
that's the best I can do.
and I understand that, I can just see the challenges we're gonna have.
Oh, I
for the
see,
public.
I see community members taking the fence on the side of those cabinets
Doing things that they shouldn't be, but that's not our problem. That's their, I think the idea of restricting for aesthetics, the radius around an intersection in a residential zone, so you can't place it within the site distance, that's a safety issue.
Yeah.
Perfect. I can deal with
Yeah.
it. But as far as placement on the front property of somebody, if they say, well, our spacing says that we have to have this here to provide this type of zone of coverage.
We're hosed.
Well, I don't have any language, you'd have to talk to city attorney about that.
Health issues are not something you can condition.
What can we say? They look ugly when they're in front of the residential home, call them an aesthetic issue.
If that were the case, then I'm gonna turn back to the
No.
legal minds.
It's mostly a safety issue.
I would say that the only thing I've done is trying to reduce the impact of property values by sticking it on the property.
Yeah.
So
The
that
safety issue is when it falls over onto my house.
Yes, or gets involved with it.
it's not gonna fall over on your house, that pedestal, that footing will not
Not
fall.
with your design, how about, okay? I got that on tape.
Well, the reason I asked that is because I watched a video where the industry was defending their radiation levels, and they're saying it's up this high, and by the time you get far enough out where you're in the pattern, it's diluted. If it's eye level with your room, that's a different matter.
So you get the tall and narrow 3-story ones that they're putting together now, stick it out there, it's gonna get hit no matter what.
Yes.
You're putting your window, like the back and front of Okay.
Moving forward, if, again, adoption process, what I classify as the adoption process is basically, are these details acceptable? Is the process that I presented, the information I presented to you acceptable for you to move forward to getting these details installed into our design manual through a resolution, updating the resolution which exists currently. So I'm just fixing a resolution that didn't have the details. Now I've got the details and I want to reestablish that connection.
I think this is awesome.
Sounds good.
And we should get it done. It's at the appropriate time, it'd be a great time to follow on and look at some of the questions we asked about noise and other things, see if we can do things later when we learn more, to your point, but
I think getting into the resolution is number one. That corrects for that blank information space,
Yes.
gives a baseline for the design, and then we start working with the design manual to incorporate those critical issues that we have into that so that we cover everything. And then we've got some weight behind it, but I need to start somewhere. So this is the basic, this is basically for me.
absolutely awesome. Great job.
So then, you need to pass something, or do you get to do it yourself?
No. The issue is going to be, I'm going to bring the original resolution back to city council. We're gonna amend it?
Yes, amended.
Amend it so that these details are now gonna be identified with I'm not changing the resolution language, except identifying the exhibits correctly to match the details.
Amending the resolution to insert these new.
Correct. To
documents.
replace those things.
And we expect that,
September 19th, I believe is next, and I'm gonna get this into Sylvia by Friday. So,
awesome.
You heard him say that.
I have the engineer's report and I have the resolution already written. It's already gone through Alan once. So you've seen it.
I'll see it in 2 weeks.
You'll see it 2 weeks. I never come unprepared.
Awesome.
Ish.
Very famous last words. So if you don't have any more,
And Craig, you're happy?
better have something in place. Then
All right. I think we're good. We got almost 15 minutes till our big council meeting, so you're adjourned.
See you there.